Hello, welcome to my grandpa's train in the middle of January. Today is one of the coldest nights of the year, so what better time to stay inside and work on some model trains. Today's video, we're going to take a look at this Athearn Genesis locomotive, or well, at least what's left of it. This poor thing somehow got mangled up pretty badly, and it's very difficult to work on these because they have extremely fine details. For example, these radiator fan grills are fine plastic, and you touch them and they will kind of mash in. So to be extremely careful with this. This one I'm going to try to straighten out later. These handrails are super thin plastic. These are not your grandpa's Athearn blue box. See, on this side, same thing. The handrail is all there, but it's coming off. And the rear handrail is missing, and the front seems to be mostly intact. We've got most of the details there. So you may or may not know that on my grandpa's train, my trains are mostly all vintage, made of metal. Some of the cars are made out of wood, American Flyer trains from the 1950s and earlier, and this is highly unusual for me. So what am I exactly going to do with this? Well, the goal for this video is just to see if I can get this to run down a track. But this one has sound and DCC built in, so I'm going to take it to a friend's railroad who has DCC operation. The first step to repairing this sad little engine is getting the shell off. The number one issue with this is that the shell and or frame are warped. As you can see here, the back of the locomotive curves, and it ain't supposed to do that, and the steps are angled in. Plus the snowplow detail on the front here is all chewed up. It's kind of hard to see, but the snowplow is sitting so low, it's actually been touching the rails, and it was operated that way, and it actually gouged the snowplow where the tracks are. So that's unfortunate. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this in my foam tray. And I did a little looking online. It says you're supposed to remove the coupler mount screws. I'm going to be using these tweezers a lot because a lot of these parts are so fine that these are a better tool to grab stuff with. Wow. Okay. So this might be further gone than I thought. I started pulling pieces off and it actually started to disintegrate. So this shell might not be salvageable. There's the other half of the coupler box. It just fell apart. Let's see if the front one does that. Nope, this one's still good. I imagine I could actually squeeze KD boxes in here. I'd have to probably trim them down a little bit. And this is a cheap plastic coupler. So I'm going to save this good coupler and put it in the rear. So we'll see if this hooks on something or if it comes right off. I imagine it's going to hook on things because of how this is, warped. Yeah, it's stuck on the rear back here. That's what I was afraid of. So a little bit of prying. Oh. Yep, just a little bit of prying and it came right out. So this is going to require some pretty advanced disassembly. Pretty much strip it down to the bare frame so that I can get the frame straightened out. I can't imagine how that would get mangled like that unless somebody dropped it. So I'm working on removing the wiring and DCC board so that I can fully separate the shell from the frame. Probably the easiest way to do that is going to be just pop the wires off of these little wire holders here. And then, so I have to disconnect the motor, the speaker, the front lights. Actually, the lights and stuff can stay with the shell. It's just the power connector wires, which are 2 on the front. Let's see here. So 1 here and then 1 in the back, and same on the rear. So that way all 8 wheels can have pickup power. So then in order to remove the wires, these little boots have to come off. So these two go to the speaker. Let's see, one more wire back here and we should be free. Yep, so there's our decoder and the shell. I'm going to work on the shell a little later. And we've got our powertrain. Okay, so at this point with the Athearn Genesis, I have been able to get the rear truck off and get the frame straightened out. As you can see, it's almost perfectly straight now. And earlier in the video, it was obviously curved down toward the rear. So I took my heat gun and gently warmed the metal so that it would bend just a little easier. Normally I would heat this up with it on full blast, but that will melt these fine little plastic details. So you want to be very careful with these Athearn Genesises. Other than the detail parts, these actually are very similar to an old Athearn Blue Box in their design and function. They come apart pretty easily. I just removed the speaker box, which also doubles as a weight. That might explain why it doesn't sound great, but anyway. So now all I have to do is put this back together and then see if it'll move down the track. There are just a couple things left to do on this Athearn Genesis locomotive. One of the things I'm going to try to do is get all these spots of what I believe are super glue that were applied heavily. There's way too much glue applied. I'm going to try to remove that, looking up some tried and proven methods from the internet. Everybody knows that the internet is always true. Anyway, to remove that glue, the other thing will be to just finish reassembling the DCC and put it back together. One method will be to try to use WD-40, or another method will be to try to use vinegar, which I have in this tub here. So what I'm going to do is dip the Q-tip in vinegar and then just dab it on gently on each of the spots, let it soak for a little bit and see if it'll scrape off. Actually, I'm going to start with this handrail decal, or detail. I'm just going to try to brush that on there so it has a chance to, because if it'll come off this, I'm not worried about damaging this as much as because it's already damaged. I'm trying to preserve the shell of the locomotive as much as I can. Hopefully this does not eat the paint off. It shouldn't. Vinegar shouldn't affect plastic necessarily too much. And I'll let that sit there for a little bit and come back to it. These glue spots appear to be stronger than super glue, and I don't want to risk damaging this shell any further than it is. Plus, I just don't have the patience to work on this ultra fine detail. This down here is more my speed. I have patience to work on this stuff here, not this ultra fine stuff. So that said, the next step for me is to put the wiring attached back to the DCC board. Now some guys might just give up and solder these right to these pads, which you could do, but I think I can actually get these back into the slots. I have my little tweezers to help me out, and so we're going to give that a shot and see how it goes. So first thing I'm going to do is take each individual wire and straighten it out, because these are starting to fray a little bit. You can kind of see that there's strands of caught wire all over the place. So what I'm going to do is twist them together really tight, so that way they will easily pop through those holes without needing to be soldered. So we got the wires for the speaker here. We've got 2 wires for the motor, 2 wires for the front pickups, and 2 wires for the rear pickups. The rear ones might be a little tricky. I might have routed those incorrectly. Well, we'll see, I guess. So I'm going to start with the longest ones I have, so that'll be the speaker wires. That one doesn't stick. Okay, all of the wires are now reattached to the DCC board, and I just need to snap it back into place. I'm going to tuck these up underneath the motor here so that they're kind of out of the way. And this board just clips on the front and the back of the motor, plastic housing just like so. And then we can reinstall our shell. Now I am going to try to straighten out a couple of the radiator fans quick. And for that, I'm going to use a small flat blade screwdriver and go in from the underneath here. So basically I'm just going to go in through the bottom of the radiator and the fans, and then gently press these out with the tiny flat blade screwdriver. Now you won't be able to see that because I need to see what I'm doing here. This should get it pressed out just where it's supposed to be. And same for this one. Here. Okay, so now I'm going to put this back together so our grills are mostly straightened out. Okay, let's see if this will actually go back on now. And yes, it does. Alright, so I have one good coupler box, and one of them is kind of mashed. So I'm going to take the one good coupler and install this on the rear of it here. You have to excuse my hands, sometimes they get in the way of the shot. Alright, the rear one is put together. The only reason I want to try to get this in is so that the screw can hold this frame together the way it's supposed to. I'm not even sure that's going to work. Oh, it did. Alright, that concludes this video of the Athearn Genesis. I fixed the major problem with it. I'm not going to worry about redoing any of the detail work on it because that's just not what I do on these. So this project is complete. However, we still have to test it, and I have a couple other ideas to do after we test it, but then I have to move on to other projects. My uncle's been bugging me about getting a couple of his locomotives repaired with new motors and such. So we're going to get to those right after this. Anyway, if you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching my grandpa's train. We'll be back to something more vintage next time. Now, let's take this over to my friend's railroad and test this thing out.
Right back up.
I just let her go all the way around.
You can only go so far because I got to try to
Oh, okay.
Tell me where to stop.
Anytime is good.
All right, back it up. I'll slow it down for you. Back up my foot.